Hello everyone, this is Marcel. Welcome back. For today I'm going to discuss the darker side of some of the interactions that occur within human nature. It's kind of a tough topic, so heads up. As of lately, one of the biggest things discussed is the Me Too movement and the effect that it's had on society. If you're sick of hearing about it, don't worry, I'm not covering it in this video. It's surprising to me that so many people are just now realizing that this is a problem. False accusations have been around forever. All that the Me Too movement is basically just a call to arms for these women to kind of profit from it directly. So, for as far as I'm concerned, this video is not going to be about Me Too, but rather about the nature and behavior that occurs in some cases in of itself. All that Me Too is, as far as I'm concerned, is the commercialization of the behavior directly for profit. So for this video, I'm going to go over some things that I witnessed myself in the past, things that were done towards me, although not necessarily accusations in of itself, but the attempt at some, if that makes any sense. I'll explain in a minute. Then I'm going to break down some patterns and some norms that I see from society in general. I'll give some suggestions on what men can do to avoid these kind of situations or problems, protect themselves regardless of whether or not they're doing anything romantic with women or otherwise. Then finally, I'm going to go over specifically what I believe causes this kind of behavior. So first things first, when I was a child, and I'm saying before I was even a teenager, I was put in a situation that could have gone horribly wrong. So picture this, I'm playing with a friend of the family. I don't recall her age, but I believe it was the same as mine. I think I was about 8 years old. I was still very young and naive when it came to behaviors of people and what to watch out for. So this girl takes me up to her room to play, which, wasn't such a big deal back then, and sticks her head out the window and starts screaming rape as loud as she can. 7 or 8 times, in fact. Then turns around at me and giggles and says, "Never mind," and goes and sits down on her bed and says, "Okay, take me, I'm yours." Before you get nervous, nothing happened. I had kissed girls when I was like 4 years old, but I didn't even have a clue at that age what she was talking about. The most we did at any point was kiss, but I didn't even realize until years later what she was actually trying to set me up for. Well, either this is something that she had done several times before, or people over in that city were just didn't care, because nobody came running to her aid, nobody came running to her rescue. I suppose that's why they say if there is ever actually an assault occurring, not to yell that, but rather to yell fire, because if you yell fire, someone will actually come. The point is, as a 8 or 9-year-old little girl, she already knew exactly how to set me up. What's really twisted about it is we kind of had a relationship that started after that without me ever stopping to think about what she was really doing, like I said, until years later. Incidentally, when I ran into her later on, she had mentioned that she had been assaulted around that time frame and tried to basically blame me even though nothing had happened. It's almost like she had set up a scenario in her mind and was unable to split it from reality, because if I would also speak to her about the experiences we had, which was, like I said, just kissing, she would go along with that. Perhaps signs of some kind of mental disorder. Nonetheless, these kind of behaviors are apparent at extremely young ages. The second story I want to share comes from a lady that I knew in high school, the earlier years of high school. I dated her briefly. I would call us friends at the time. We can almost look at this as a case study. She had a difficult childhood, wound up with 2 mothers somehow. She strongly presented goth-type behaviors, but it was borderline emo long before emo ever existed. She was always kind of depressed and dark and dreary. This girl was completely obsessed with talking kinky, to the point of almost bragging about it. She would discuss her favorite handcuffs, whether or not duct tape worked better than electrical tape when it came to binding her. She had a whips and chains conversation on almost a daily basis with anyone that would sit down with her. Ironically enough, she was a virgin at that point, well, supposedly. So obviously you can see the contradiction in what she was saying and claiming versus her assertion that she hadn't been with anyone prior, but at this point it really is irrelevant. Her first experience was with another boy in high school, and what's disturbing about it is that he did exactly what she would have asked for. Not to get into details here, but supposedly he had strapped her down to a chair. Well, she rather bluntly accused him of raping her. No police report, just the accusation itself amongst her friends and the community. What makes this even more twisted is when I asked her, kind of more out of reflex, how was it, she wryly answered, it was alright. So on the one hand, she was accusing him, and on the other hand, it was exactly what she had wanted. While I was growing up, and I believe I've mentioned this in older videos, there were literally dozens of situations that I came across personally where a girl had accused a guy of taking advantage of her, even to the point of assaulting her, whereas nothing had really happened that could be told, and there was no police report or anything to substantiate that something had really happened. Probably a good 90% of the accusations involved alcohol or drugs of some kind. This brings me into my first really good tip to anybody out there who's potentially thinking of being around women or being active. Women and substances don't mix nowadays. It's basically a thing of the past. If either party, the guy or the girl, is intoxicated in any way, it's just opening up the door for him to get accused. I'm sure most of you already know that, but I would go as far as to say don't even get drunk when women are around. And let's be honest here, from a blue pill perspective, if the guy has to get sloppy, nasty drunk in order to enjoy the sex, he probably needs to be around better women. Moving forward, one of the issues that I had when I was going through high school was the teasing. If you can even call it that. I mean, I had knives pulled on me, kids burning my homework in the middle of class. It got pretty intense. Tough times make tough men, I suppose. One of the effects of all this is that I wound up carrying around a tape recorder with me. Clunky thing, but it fit in my bag and it got the job done. Incidentally, the state that I was living in allowed that I could record a conversation that I was present for without anybody around knowing that I was recording it. And the purpose of it was basically to record if there was any issues, confrontation with other kids, but it wound up becoming very useful in other ways. I wound up using it more to show women how irrational they were behaving when they thought that no one had been listening. Referring to the little mechanical device, that is. Of course, naturally, once the women knew that I was doing that, it pretty much ended the relationship then and there. But if those girls were going to be liars, then why should I mess with them anyway, right? They're just toxic and probably even dangerous. So incidentally, that tool became something I used more in dating than I did to prevent fights and stuff, or rather protect me after the fight. I would suggest, and I realize this is going to not pertain to 90% of my audience, well, maybe it will at work and stuff, but if you're going to be around women, find out if you can, in your state, use a tape recorder, maybe a GoPro, have the little record app on your phone handy. You never know when you're going to want to click that thing on. Hell, you can get a tape recorder from Walmart for like $50. It's a little tiny thing, and it's got a really good range. Technology has gotten impressive these days. Sure, having recorded a conversation would mean the death of any relationship, but if you really had to use what you'd recorded, it's already done. Something had already gone horribly wrong, right? Find out what's available in your own states and then see what you can get away with. I honestly try to keep one handy even at work and stuff if I know women are going to be around. Yes, I do realize, of course, that women are not the only issues when it comes to workplace conflicts. I just don't see men as the same kind of threat. In all my years, I have never had an issue with a man in the same context that I've had with women or I've seen others have with women. I'm always respectful and I work fine with them, but my frickin' guard is up. So why does this nonsense happen? In young age and older age, why does it keep popping up, these whole false accusations outside of Me Too, like I said earlier? Unsolicited. Here's the way that I see it. Every experience a woman has now is potentially both voluntary and assault. They set up almost a dual reality in their mind to cope with the situation, how it plays out one way or the other. Many of them, not all I guess, many of them don't have the ability to distinguish between the two realities and ultimately settle on the scenario that they agree with the most after the experience is done. Possibly even just who they happen to be speaking to afterwards. Meaning it can potentially switch back and forth. I always screw up this title, but like Schwarzenegger's cat, it's both possibilities until it's forced to be one or the other. It makes it really hard to hold a woman in your arms knowing that there's a 50-50 chance that it's not going to be voluntary once it's done. That there's part of her brain that is fabricating a scenario where it isn't. And now look at society. Can we really even argue that that isn't happening? To take it back a little bit to what I was originally talking about, As most of us are already aware, it is really hard for some people to take agency for their actions or their mistakes, right? The easiest and almost expected way to get out of being held responsible for their actions is to claim that it wasn't voluntary. In the case of these young high school girls that I grew up around, I can't think of many of them that actually wanted to have their first experience. In the bedroom, that is. Now, of course, this is referring to all the ones that I heard about, but every last one of them that I heard about was involuntary. They claimed that it was assault. Now, maybe those are just the ones that weren't happy about it. Maybe it really was assault. Maybe it was even just a surprise to them that they lost control of themselves and tackled the poor guy. It's really impossible to tell. I can just go off of what all of them told me when I happened to speak to them about it. And the only ones that were flapping their mouths were saying that it wasn't voluntary. I can't recall even a single situation where the guy was ever brought to charges legally by those actions, but almost every single time he was shunned, his reputation within the community was destroyed, and this was all before he had spent a day out of high school. It was truly tragic. But none of the girls or women had as much of an issue with every subsequent boyfriend they had beyond that point. It was a kind of, well, you know, I already did it once, so I might as well not worry about it for later. It's already done. It's gone. I made a comment, I want to say it was on TFM's channel the other day, talking about virginity, and that a guy who takes a girl's virginity, it's almost like he's buying a car off the lot brand new. It loses half its value the minute he buys it. In essence, the next guy's going to get it at half price. Regardless of whether or not he keeps it, he's going to wind up paying for it for years. Even if the guy winds up staying with that girl, she's going to hold it over him that he took that away from her, almost like she gave him some precious gift, as if he didn't lose it as well at exactly the same time or at some point. Nonetheless, it was almost a phenomenon that every first experience that these women, these girls had was not a voluntary one. They offloaded all of the responsibility of the experience onto the guy. Nowadays, that mindset has bled into all of the relationships. Regardless of how many men she's been with, it's no longer just the first one. All of them take responsibility into their hands. Thing is, even if a guy were to have like tape recorders and, video recording or something to protect himself against false accusations, the woman would twist it that he was doing some kind of kinky theft of her image and would probably charge him with assault or something, equivalent to that. Hell, I'd almost say that they try and claim it was a form of rape in of itself, just to take video footage of the guy and the girl were doing so that he wouldn't be accused. Convenient, right? Every way that a guy can protect himself slowly gets whittled away to where there's no protection anymore. That's why I tell people, gentlemen, it's just not worth it. All the more reason to go our own way. But that's about all I have to say on this topic. If you have any interesting stories, experiences, things you've seen, share them down below. If you want to hear more content like this, like, share, subscribe. And until later, this has been Marcel.